Hello from inside this crystal. Welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in, sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome, and welcome back if you have. My intention is unity and oneness and the highest levels of love light. I'm hoping this microphone works. Everybody's asleep right now, so I'm trying to be a little bit quiet as it's still dark out, and I thought, now's a good time to maybe get up and go into a little bit of flow. And I wanted to just kind of give a recap first on the energies, and then I'll go into flow with my guides. So there's so much that I could share. Everybody's going through a lot right now in my world. And as you guys have, if you watch these videos, you've known that I've recently gone through some things that have potentially brought up fear. And my guides are continually sharing messages that there tends to be this fear that's present in the field right now for a lot of reasons. And let me just list a few. Earth changes, political upheaval, the idea or potential of catastrophe, which goes back to earth changes, but also can be associated with war or potential skirmishes with certain social and economic groups that are divided. And I could go on and on and on. Health, a lot going on in the world right now regarding cancer, regarding just health in general. So with all of this floating around in the field, it can be challenging for us sometimes to not get pulled into that place. Yet I'm being invited to invite everybody else to recognize that if and when you are in that place of what if this happens, what if that happens, to just stop for a moment and recognize that that is something going on inside of your head, inside of your body, so on and so forth. When we go into a place of fear, it literally creates a chemical reaction with cortisol, so on and so forth. It goes up in our bodies. So if we can recognize and acknowledge that we're in this place of fear, then it allows us the opportunity to unwind it, to dissolve it, to move through it, not to avoid it, not to ignore it, pretend like it's not there or get upset, feel silly that we're having these thoughts. It isn't silly to recognize that we might be sensing an undercurrent in the collective, and we might be picking up on that and taking it on as our own energy. That's another thing that's happening. We might have people in our lives that we're worried about. It might be our own fears that are coming up because we haven't necessarily dealt with them, or we thought we dealt with them, and here they are showing up for us again. My friend Kat always talks about future tripping, and I love it when she says that. I acknowledge if I'm in a place of fear about something that could happen, I'm future tripping. I'm projecting myself into the future, and that isn't necessarily happening now. It might look like it's a potential, and this is where we're headed, but that doesn't mean that's really going to be the case. And there's also an undercurrent of fear in the spiritual community with people that I've spoken with and that have reached out to me, of where where humanity is going. Yet, if you go a little deeper, there's a huge influx of really beautiful, positive change. And I want to talk a little bit about that too, because sometimes those changes can be interpreted through a fear filter. If we're going through something, and let's say there's earth changes happening, or there's changes happening in our bodies that are trying to get our attention, we can go into a place of the fear filter. We look at it from that place of, oh no, that's where we're going. And we give up, or we come into a place of paralyzation. Fear can be paralyzing. It keeps us, in a sense, safe, because then if we don't move, that change doesn't have to happen. If we avoid it, we don't need to actually integrate it. Do you see where I'm going with this? So I'm just being invited to ask everybody else if that's something that you're experiencing right now. Maybe it's coming from the energy that you're feeling all around. And that's where the guides keep saying how important it's so important it is to go back within and ask ourselves, who does this belong to? When we ask ourselves, who does this belong to? We can sometimes get answers that are unexpected. The first thing is it might belong to no one. It might just be something that kind of came into my field and triggered something inside of me. And now that I'm acknowledging that trigger, that's the work. That's the integration. I don't have to sit here and mull it over and do a lot of shadow work around it. Who does this belong to can also refer to, does this belong to the Carrie that is now in this moment, or does this belong to 8-year-old Carrie? Does this belong to me or you a week ago? I was really nervous about this a year ago, and now I feel like I'm nervous, or I should be, but maybe I'm not as fearful as I was. Acknowledging that difference is also important, because sometimes we just get into this habit and we call it, we label it. I'm afraid of this. But if we really stop and ask ourselves, am I really afraid of that? Who does this belong to? Is this still something that I'm afraid of? And why am I attached to this story? All of these things are a form of inner work. And so I'm really kind of going into that topic because sometimes we can feel like inner work has to be complicated. And one of the reasons I started the channel, Keep It Simple Star Seeds, is because oftentimes, you have a little bit of coffee. Oftentimes we can overcomplicate things. I don't know if you do. I certainly do. So keep it simple. And we don't necessarily have to complicate it and go down all of these layers if it's something simple. All right. So other times we do need to go down those. If it's something that comes up over and over and over again, or that is a good recognition to acknowledge this is maybe something I need to address because for whatever reason I haven't moved past this. And it can be anything. Staying out of judgment about what that is also really important. Excuse me, in doing the work. So this is where it might be valuable to have a conversation with a therapist, to try a healing modality that you haven't tried before, to go to some workshops or meditation classes, to take a breathwork class, to actually do change it up a little bit and start to journal, do creative practices. I mean, I've talked about this a lot before, and These are all things and tools that I've used over the last 5 years, especially of my life, because with my Kundalini awakening, we could call it, all of my fear was brought up to the surface immediately. And I had to deal with it in a very big way. And those fears can be something as simple as being afraid when we were a child because of something we saw, or a scary movie that we don't even realize stuck in our heads. It can be from loss of a loved one. It can be anything, but it's important for us to feel it, to acknowledge it, because if we ignore something, it's like ignoring that part of us. And when we ignore parts of ourselves, even though the fear isn't really us, it isn't who we really are, it is still something that is part of who we think we are, or it is still something we are attaching ourselves to or drawing to us for a reason. Even if that reason is something as simple as a trigger because of a movie. I mean, you guys, it can be anything. So really staying out of judgment around this is really important. Limiting certain things in our lives right now that bring up those fears for unnecessary reasons, such as watching fearful TV shows and fearful movies or watching the news, can be really helpful right now to help us navigate and differentiate what really belongs to us and is something we need to address, or something that is just stirring up in the field that's making our imaginations go in that direction. And that's the next message I want to kind of go into. We are creating the future now. So if we are focusing our awareness, our directive, directing the movie, directing our intention, our attention, our energy to somebody else's programming or habitual programming that we have gotten into the habit of cycling over and over again, that's going to be what we continue to perpetuate moving forward. And so this is the whole theme of waking up, right? That whole subject of recognizing that is part of being aware. Being aware is awakening to or acknowledging to change, awakening and becoming aware of our feelings, our habits, our patterns. And once we recognize that, this automatic programming isn't able to attach to us the way that it used to. And it loses its potency, it loses its power. And then we begin to renew and adapt, find our own inner innate abilities that then allow us to harness our own power. And we become the power source rather than looking for another source to power us. So not even, we might have even been doing that and not, what I'm hearing is subconsciously. Okay. So those were the biggest messages that were coming through. The word that keeps coming up also is adaptability. So one of the biggest fears that people are feeling right now is the fear of change. And we may not realize that that's what we're afraid of, but we don't want our bodies to change. We don't want our normalcy to change. There's a lot of people I talk with in session or I work with who are afraid of, well, the future in general, but they're afraid for their children. They're afraid for the world. They're afraid for Earth. Or really what they're afraid of is that it's going to look different than how they're used to it looking. And we all can be afraid of that, myself included, when we look at it from that filter of what if something bad happens, I do my best to think and feel, what if though that leads to something good happening? And it isn't always the way that it works, but there's so many beautiful things that are happening. It allows me to see through the filter and acknowledge and witness and recognize the good things that are happening. And then those things that I'm worried about take on less of a power, or they take on less of an identity that I identify with. So the change is huge because all kinds of changes are happening. I've got some videos I'm going to be sharing soon, just about the things I've been channeling that are really wacky and out there, but there's a reason that I share it in the way that I share it. Part of my journey has been letting go of the fear of what other people think and letting go of the fear of judgment and recognizing that we all have our own way of expressing ourselves. And the way that I express myself in some of these videos isn't necessarily normal. And that's kind of the message that I'm passing on, is these changes that we're seeing don't necessarily add up with how things have been in the past. So we're really being called to change our perspective. And so when I work with these individuals who are afraid of change, it's just kind of recognizing that, what is it we're really afraid of about that? Can we shift our frequency now, in this now moment, so that when this change occurs, we've already set ourselves up and adapted? What I'm hearing is quickly adapting. So we are adapting faster than we've ever adapted before. Our adaptability rate has gone up. And this is for a myriad of reasons. But these things that are happening on the earth, I'm actually channeling about things that are hidden in the earth that are going to show us more about our reality. The things that are coming from our solar system are helping us. Yes, there's a lot of negative programming that is happening, that is attempting to divert our attention, energy, and therefore creative abilities toward that story. And that is something that we are recognizing, acknowledging, and beginning to adapt, so that we are changing the way in which we are adapting. We are changing the way in which we are experiencing our reality, because we are changing our perspective. Therefore, we are changing our reality. And so the things that we might feel afraid of right now, we might not be afraid of next week. And the things that we think are going to happen, because all of us of a collective are not focusing on those things happening, may not actually happen. Or they may not actually happen in the way that we are focusing on them happening. It could shift direction, because now reality adapts with us. Earth is adapting. Space is adapting. The space in which we exchange energy is adapting, because our energy is shifting and changing. Therefore, reality, earth, and space, and all of those things also are changing in order to accommodate us. And I'm not saying that from a self-centered, egoic, we are the center of the universe perspective. We are the universe. We are the mycelium network that is connected with, through, and in all things. Therefore, it has to happen that way. One cannot shift without the other, because we are not separate from all of that. So these are just things to feel into. Okay, so that's my energy update. I think there's so much more. I'm going to go into a little flow. And this is meant to be felt, not necessarily understood on a linear basis, although some of this will be um, very linearly presented. So as we drop in and tune into our inner resources, we always connect with our inner source of connection. And as stated earlier, that which we are connecting into is connected into all things, into a deeper source of energy that allows us to unbind from that which we have been bound to before. So let us go into more. And that is exactly what we are doing when we go within. We go into more resources than we have consciously than when we are unconscious of our resources. We let go of the over-identification with resources outside of us, and we begin to stimulate an inner mechanism that stimulates the senses. And as we do this, the alchemy in me begins to reorganize its patterning, begins to reorganize the patterns that we attune to, and therefore the patterns in the universe attune to us and allow us to renew in that moment. So we begin to change our trajectory in such a way that the fabrication in which we create, or the creation and fabrication of reality in which we intermingle and co-create with, through, and together, also shifts. There is much that is stored inside the storage system of the human body, the human technology. For the human technology is a body, an orchestration, a symphony of work, of energy that works together in a synergistic format that codes or creates codes that give us the adaptability to create more codes in conjunction with all reality codes. This conducts the orchestration, the symphony, the symphonetic net and weaving of alchemy that allows us to restore, renew, and reactivate that which is innate that has been turned down, shut down, or temporarily been disconnected from in the past. So we invite all tuning in, as you tune your instrument, to let go of the need to hang on to the past reasons. I'm hearing logistics, so logic, reason why, logistics, like this happened because of that, and now I must do this because of that, and that person was wrong, so they have to pay the price because there's a new value system that's happening. And once we let go of that, we kind of allow, what I'm hearing is, there's many different layers. Judgment, paying for something, is associated with a value and a system that was very helpful many years ago. But we are no longer in need of that type of energy. So I know that there's people out there who are like, well, how are people going to be accountable? How are they going to be held accountable? And what I'm being called to look at is, why are we focusing on what they need to do when we're not necessarily focusing on what we are needing to do? Or let's look at that as a reflection on where we need to be held accountable. And then we shift that which it is we value. Are we valuing more around other people needing to, I'm seeing a lasso, like, get back here, you have to pay for that. Yes, there is a need for accountability in all regions. And if somebody does something that's not right, in the sense of, when I say right, my guides kind of get me away from right or wrong. But let's say they call it an angle, the right angle. Like, there's a whole beautiful puzzle, and that one thing or that one person creates a disease in the puzzle, or a wrong angle where it doesn't fit, it's distorted and it's ugly. But what happens is I'm showing all of the puzzle pieces coming together and not being ruffled or rippled by that one distortion. What happens is that distortion takes care of itself. Now, this is not in reference to, if you're a part of the law and you're part of how the judicial system works, or if you're, let's say, a police officer, or there's something having to do with that's your job because that's how you came to build this reality, that's not what we're referring to, we as the guides. They're referring more of the energy of judgment, watching television and saying that person needs to pay for this, while simultaneously we're going throughout our day and we're not acknowledging how we're interacting with other people, where we are not being, I'm hearing, careful with our words, careful with ourselves. I'm just feeling full of compassion. This doesn't mean that if somebody is mistreating and abusing someone in front of us, we don't step up and help that individual. That's not what this is referring to at all. If more people did that, not from a place of judgment, but literally from a place of, this is right in front of me, this is part of my reality, how can I help? How can I serve? Rather than, that person needs to pay for what they've done. There's a very different energy that's attached with that, if that makes sense. The deeper element of this is that if all of us were treating each other with respect and we cared for one another, those types of behaviors wouldn't happen. They wouldn't be tolerated, they wouldn't be allowed, meaning that person couldn't get away with it in the first place because the group that they were attempting to assert their dominance over wouldn't allow it. And it's not even allowing it. It wouldn't happen because it wouldn't be even something that would be supported in that reality. So a lot of what we're witnessing is an echo from the past. It's a distortion that we are being called to acknowledge and look at within ourselves. But also it's a distortion to say, how can I serve in this situation? And not continue to create anger and hostility and judgment within my body in reaction to this situation. And by the way, that's difficult to do, because when we watch someone else going through something that seems unnecessary, especially on the television, it's very difficult sometimes for us with open hearts to witness, to bear witness to. I'm also being called to share that by us not watching the news, it doesn't mean we're burying our heads in the sand. I have listened to, let me go backwards for a moment. We're being called to start at home. We're being called to start at the grocery store. We're being called to start at work. We're being called to start wherever we are that we have a sphere of influence in, to begin with that. Then that'll have a ripple effect to those that have a greater influence, let's say with a larger group of people, or are involved in working with the youth, or working with people who are mentally incapacitated because of anger or massive imbalances, or what's the other word I used a minute ago? Distortions in their field. I keep bringing back to the Ho'oponopono prayer. So if you guys look up the story of Ho'oponopono, I would encourage you to do that and where this began. And so it's going to take some time potentially for all of those situations to play out. So we may be called to step up at times to support our brothers and sisters. And that is where we are right now. But moving forward in the future, that won't be as necessary because we will not be creating or having this echo from these past disassociations, anger, fear, and distortions in the field, because we are now at the process of dissolving all of those, right? So that's just something to recognize and keep in mind. We're all human. We're going to have these feelings. But going back to what I stated earlier in the video, recognizing those feelings is very important. It's okay to have those feelings, right? Especially if we have open hearts, we're going to feel for our brothers and sisters. So exerting our compassion into the field is much stronger of a force than anger. And this sounds unrealistic, yet in reality, compassion has a stronger effect. It is more effective as a collective than a group of angry individuals. So I'm seeing a fuse, it's a longer wave. You can ride it longer. Anger does this, right? Highs and lows, highs and lows. So it is a force, but it doesn't have the substance that compassion and love does. So if we can exert, it's the play on words, compassion as often as we can. We're going to have moments of anger and frustration. But if we can do that at bigger intervals, then that has a ripple effect as a collective than if we're angry all the time, or if we're allowing that anger to be our momentum to make a change. And by the way, I'm being called to share, sometimes that anger is exactly what we need in the moment to carry us into the charge of change. But once we feel that emotion, are we acting from that anger? Are we responding to our environment with continued force and exertion of anger? Or can we express it from a balanced way and then integrate it in a conversational way in which we can change our frequency? Or sometimes no words are necessary. Nothing is needing to be said because we realize, oh, that's mine. That's my problem. And in other cases, nothing needs to be said because that other person is working out their own traumas. Now, granted, if they're exerting it at us, then it becomes part of our reality, and we have to make the decision of how we're going to address this. But we can do it with compassion and say words such as, this is not something that you need to project onto me right now, right? Or, I'm sorry you feel that way. And that may not even be the words you want to use. I understand you feel this way, I hope we can come to some resolution. And inside, using that Ho'oponopono prayer, I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me, thank you. Even if we're not the ones that are in the wrong angle, it's shifting our angel, in order to shift the frequency of our awareness so that we can adapt in that moment and change the chemical combustion that's happening in an angry or hostile situation. And in some situations, we have to work with survival, depending on where we are. That's usually few and far in between, though. And that usually has more to do with where we've chosen to participate our reality in, so on and so forth. And I'm seeing like the military or law enforcement as an example, you know. Um, so I'm hearing the pressure. So when we, oh, there's a flow. I'll have to go into with this. Okay. So when we exert the pressure of compassion, it allows us to pressurize the compartmentalization that we are now encapsulated within. And this allows us to, I'm seeing, send it out so that it doesn't create an explosion. It creates more of an emulsification. It creates the ability to work through the polarization. And it's literally changes the dynamic flow of the flow. And it allows for a deeper impact to be made, decreasing the impact of the grenade, so to speak. That's a play on words. I'm seeing, like, rather than a bomb exploding, it's more of like decreasing the impact that it's going to have, because we're holding space rather than reacting to it or getting volatile. It decreases the velocity and volatility of that interaction. So essentially we diffuse it, and this is a play on words. I'm hearing we diffuse the confusion. So I'm going to kind of end on this note and just also, so that was like an address a little bit around this chaos that all of us are feeling. I'm going to do some more videos coming up about the, maybe some more questions on the astrology, the earth changes, some more of the woo-woo stuff that I've been channeling information on. But I also am planning on doing some more practical videos. And a lot of the things I'm doing, I'll be doing this summer. So for those of you who I've worked with in the past, or those of you who've wanted to book sessions, I've really been focusing on, I'm really busy right now focusing on these videos and the sessions of repeat clients that I've been working with on more of a regular basis, to kind of help some of the people in my life who are going through some pretty deep challenges right now. Plus, I work, in different modalities that keep me busier at different times of the year. So for those of you who've been unable to book, this summer I'll be opening up a lot more of my schedule to make myself more available for some mastery classes and some more one-on-ones and some workshops and things like that. But I'm sharing this with you guys because I know there's a lot of you out there who are busy, and it's really challenging for you to find time to do what you really want to do. And that's something I'm going to be talking about as well, because it's important for us to make that time for ourselves and not over schedule ourselves or over, especially if we're going through a lot of the physical changes that are being felt right now, especially if we're going through health scares, back to the fear thing. We're processing all of this. We're processing a lot of fear. It can take a lot of toll on our bodies. So I've kind of also felt that and needed to kind of pull back a little bit and regain my own energetic composure so that I can compose what I need to do when I am working with the people that I'm working with, so that I'm not spread so thin energetically that I'm not giving 100%. And I want to bring that to everybody's awareness because, I've done that in the past. I've been really run ragged because I asked myself, how could I be of service? And I was not recognizing that that question applies to me as well. So I'm inviting you guys to see that within your own world. Where can I kind of take a moment and work on what feels really important to me right now, within the time frame that I'm able to? Oftentimes we want to do everything. We want to work with everyone. We want to do as much as we can, and then we end up really sick, or we end up not being able to integrate important periods of our life because we're so focused on everyone else. So that's something really important just to keep in mind, giving ourselves that gift. So I just wanted to share that with you guys because I'm taking a lot of my spare time right now to do these videos. And I'm working with some clients who are going through a lot. And it's taking more regular intervals working with these clients, making myself readily available for them so that we can kind of follow through on these chapters and have closure. And that's been it's been different for me. So I just wanted to kind of share from my own personal experience. You guys might be feeling that as well. You guys might be feeling like your interactions, sometimes it's okay, we had a great interaction. I talked to this person, I haven't talked to them in a while, and that was perfect. Other times it's like, well, you know what? I need to have this conversation with my mom again because I feel like she needs my time and attention right now. And I have been avoiding that. I'm using that as an example, not to say it's my mom, but it might be your mother, it might be your brother, it might be your kids. Focusing on that is very important also right now. Okay. In love and light, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you so much for just being in this now moment and for all of your energy that you're rippling out. It really has a greater impact than sometimes we even realize. And for those of us who are clairvoyant, we can see it in the field and it's beautiful. So, in love and light, namaste.